Hey guys, welcome to the Fortified Castle. Today's going to be the fourth installment on the series How to Date Your Knife, and that's where we look at other indicators that can give you a time frame for a knife, country of origin, and even the manufacturer of a knife. And so today we're going to be talking about steel. Before I do that though, I want to show you this pocket watch. It's an Elgin, and if you look real close, it's little tiny pearls going around that. Really cool. Man, they used to just make things so nice, huh? So, all right, let's get down to the subject. So let's first talk about stainless steel. So this knife was made by a stainless cutlery company out of New York, and all they did is make stainless products. So this is stainless steel, even though it doesn't say it. It says stainless shield, which that means it's stainless steel. And so you'll see stainless steel first came out in 1914 in England, and in America 1921. So knives that have that on it are going to be a base date of those dates, 1914, 1921. And so that helps you at least to know that a knife isn't any older than that. Also, in the first part of the 20th century, they used all kinds of hokey names for knives, stainless. So, I mean, they used like rust-free, no stain, resist stain. And so those kind of things would date the knife probably to pre-1945 if they had those on there. I don't think I've seen knives past, the 50s that still had those hokey names. They just went to calling it stainless steel. And if a knife is foreign, it's going to have a foreign name for stainless steel, like rustfria for German. The Germans actually used a couple different names for stainless steel. And in France, it was inox, inox, and that stands for inoxidable, which is stainless steel. Thing about inoxidable, you'll see that on British knives, German knives, and Swedish knives. So you can't really pinpoint it to France, but it's likely French, at least European. And so that's how stainless steel helps us. When you look back in the 1800s, what you're really talking about is four basic steels. So you have blister steel, shear steel, crucible steel, and Bessemer steel. All those were used at one point or another in the 1800s. For the most part, crucible steel was a steel used in pocket knives, and that was used up until 1940. Shear steel was used in things like this. So this is a carver that dates to the 1800s, late 1800s, like 1890, maybe 1880. But anyhow, shear steel was used in things that they thought needed to be really sharp. And so things like carvers, kitchen cutlery, it was used in straight razors and surgical instruments. And the deal with the shear steel is if you look at this carver here, you can see it has a serrated edge. And shear steel has a microscopic serrated edge on it. And so they believe that it cuts sharper. I don't know whether it really does or not. I've never really believed in serrated edges. But at any rate, that's the deal on that. And Bessemer steel came out about 1852. And it's just a faster process for making crucible steel, basically. Not a lot of the difference in the steels, Bessemer steel and crucible steel. I think they did add a little bit of magnesium in the Bessemer process, and so by spectrum analysis, you could tell the difference between the steels, but just looking at them, you couldn't. And the Americans very early on embraced the Bessemer process. So probably by 1870, almost all the steel in American knives was Bessemer. And once again, England was really slow to adopt the Bessemer process and really didn't start switching over until the late 1800s, early 1900s. So how's that help you? So if you had an early knife, you thought it was pre 1850s, for instance, very few knives had shear steel in it at that time frame, unless it was the categories I gave you: kitchen cutlery, straight razors, surgical instruments. But you can look at the edge of these blades under magnification and you can tell the difference. And I'll explain that in a minute. Most of the shear steel that was used in pocket knives is marked. And so pocket knives marked shear steel will date to the mid to late 1800s, say 1890. And that's easily recognizable. If you get one that says shear steel, it's going to be pre-1890 probably, and probably date to the middle 1800s. Shear steel was a go-to steel before crucible steel. So crucible doesn't really take hold and get into the mainstream until 1790, early 1800s. And so what that creates is a datable event for us. So if you had a knife that you thought was an early 1800 knife, if you compare the edges on crucible steel and shear steel, you're going to see the difference. And if you were to look at the edges of the knives like this, they look the same. If you go to 30 magnification, you start seeing serrations on the edge of the knife, but they still look pretty much the same. So to do this, you need something that magnifies to 50 times or better. So 50, 60, 70, 80 magnification to really see the difference in the knives. But when you look at this shear steel blade under magnification, at 50 times, what you see is a really regular saw-like edge. That's normal for any knife. The difference is on shear steel, what you're going to see is little black spots along the edge of the blade. They can be circular, they could be elongated. They look like little voids in the metal. And that's because shear steel was not as clean. It had more impurities than crucible steel. And so that shows up under magnification. So if you had a knife that you thought was from the 1820s or 1810s, if you look under magnification and you see that those gaps in the edge and the ragged edge of the blade, it's shear steel. And this, all you need to do is get you a knife like this. These kitchen knives, antique kitchen knives, are cheap. You can pick them up for $5, and they're all shear steel. So back in the 1800s, that's just what was used in these things. And so this is your example. And just look at some of your, look at the edges under magnification of a few of your vintage folders, and then look at this. And it doesn't take long to get that down. It's very apparent when you look at the edge of this under magnification. So it's not really complicated and it's not hard to do. You do need to pick up, you have to pick up an example. So the best way to do that, these should be shear steel too. So old knives, old straight edges that date back into the 1890s, 1880s are going to be shear steel. So one of the two, either kitchen knife or a razor, whatever you want, and that'll get you there. The last thing I'm going to cover is blister steel. So blister steel dates to the Middle Ages, and it's called blister steel because in the process of forming the steel, it blisters, and so they're like little bubbles along the steel. And if you do a little bit of research, you'll see what it is. But it just looks like a little blister on the metal's kind of fractured, and it sticks up a little bit, and that's blister steel. Blister steel was used since the Middle Ages, but shear steel largely replaced blister steel in the 1700s. So you're not really likely to find a knife from the 1700s in general circulation, but you might. And I think it's good to know because there's always that chance that a knife that's been in a family for generations finally makes it out and sees the daylight. And I think it's worth just knowing that when you see it. If you see blister steel, that's a really old knife. I did read of one guy who found the knife that dated to the 1500s, and he found it at a flea market. So, it's possible. Anything's possible. And I'm going to wrap that up for steels. That's about the best that I can do to help you out on steels and dating knives. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to see more content like this, I appreciate it if you subscribe. And thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to look at this video. Thanks again.